And we're recording. And so Lisa Owens from City Life Vida Urbana, welcome. And the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
All right. So I have slides, and I think that, Jenny, you're good to go? Yep.
I think I just shared permission for you to share your screen.
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay. Well then, I will do this myself. You're seeing. Okay. All right. So slides help me stay on time. That's why I'm doing this. So Nia, thank you for inviting me to talk about City Life's work. We are, like everybody, trying to both respond to the crisis in a way that makes sense and that takes care of people's immediate needs, but also that's forward thinking. We're not trying to put everything on hold. So we've been doing this really delicate balancing act. So so what you're seeing is kind of how we have figured out how to adapt what we do and also how to respond to the moment. All right, so we are doing, we continue to do a mix of leadership development and community organizing against displacement, and now advocacy around specific COVID-19 related stuff. So that's what I'm gonna show you. So leadership development is a really core part of what we do. We have our advanced training series, which we call 100 Cadre. They had been on hiatus, but now that we have figured out how to do trainings over Zoom, they are resuming, which is awesome. So we'll likely start up 100 Cadre in early June, which is pretty cool for us. We have a Black Feminist Study Action Group that my colleague Denise and I run, and that also is starting up in June. It's a small group of Black women leaders who are deepening our commitment to each other and also our practice around building a Black feminist organization. So that's super cool. Cool. So also new for this moment, we have beefed up our ability to offer things to new people. So as you'll see in a minute, we have lots and lots and lots of new people coming through our doors. And so we are experimenting with weekly Hangouts at City Life over Zoom. So these are short weekly political discussion drop-in sessions that we do over Facebook Live. We have started them. So this Thursday, tomorrow, is our second one. And we've been talking about staying healthy while at home. So that's pretty cool. If you are interested in helping us think about topics, Mike Leyba, my colleague, is the one organizing this, and you can email him at mleyba, M-L-E-Y-B-A, @clvu.org. So our organizing has been super, super busy. We have an emergency hotline, which we opened pretty soon after the state of emergency was declared, and we're at 800 calls plus. And our organizers spend most of their time dealing with these emergency hotline calls. So that's one of the primary ways that people are connecting with City Life now. But there are some other ways. So we continue to have our Tuesday night meetings and our Wednesday night meetings. Tuesdays are entirely in English and Wednesdays are entirely in Spanish because that is the easiest thing for us to do over Zoom. So our Wednesday night meeting is happening right now. We continue to have our biweekly tenant organizing committee meetings, and the TOC has been figuring out how to continue to organize tenant associations in a socially distant way. So we continue to do flyering around the city. We have set up our tenant leaders with Zoom, and we're doing our tenant association meetings every week or every other week over Zoom. And so they're figuring out creative ways to organize folks in their building, even though we can't physically be together. Our leadership team meeting continues to meet, and as I said, our tenant association meetings are meeting. Okay, so how are we responding to the moment? So folks probably know that we were one of the Homes for All groups that won the eviction and foreclosure moratorium. It was a 4-week process, and it is the best in the nation. So it is a full moratorium, which means a pause on all evictions and all foreclosures, except for a very, very tiny set of exceptions, predominantly health and safety, for renters, small homeowners, and small businesses. And so if you know of someone who is getting an illegal eviction, at this point, all evictions or most evictions and foreclosures are illegal, please, please, please share our hotline number in English or in Spanish. So we won phase 1, which is amazing. Phase 2 is the next set of demands. So we, in a couple of weeks, will file some new legislation that is meant to cancel rent and mortgage debt and to stabilize all tenants for a year after the state of emergency is lifted. So stay tuned for more information, because this is going to be a much harder battle to win, because we're talking about abolishing debt. So we're going to need all Ujima folks to help us in that fight. And then lastly, we continue to be working with our partners nationally who are also doing their own cancel rent and mortgage payment and debt campaigns through the Right to the City Homes for All campaign. So any questions about that, definitely reach out to me, and our Facebook page has kind of all of our, like, you can always figure out what we're doing if you go to our Facebook page. So that's what we're up to.
Cool, thank you, Lisa. I definitely have a question for you, but let's go to Monique. And you did well with the time, that was 8 minutes. So let's go to Monique. And Monique, now you have the floor, 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions from members. And Monique, if you're there, you're muted. If you're talking. Okay, so I think while we're waiting for Monique to join, maybe let's just start with some questions. Oh, okay. Monique, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Monique is not physical distancing. She's at a rally.
I'm actually I'm throwing back to last year. So basically, Matahari. So we are a women's organization organizing women working low-wage sectors, specifically women of color and immigrant women who we identify who are disproportionately impacted by violence and exploitation. I'm sorry that in my, I don't know, there's just too much light in my eye, so it might feel like I'm the sun right now, but it's just illusion. So in the background here, this is the biggest event Matahari holds every year with our membership. And it happens usually happens right before in April, right before the lockdown happened. So we actually had a huge hit in not being able to convene together because it's like a big organizing event where members spend months outreaching to people, doing street outreach and encouraging people to come out to this domestic worker organizing day that we hold every year. So I've been feeling super isolated, so I use this background image so I can feel in connection with the membership now that we are socially distancing. Yes, I'm actually inspired by Lisa's slideshow stuff to guide me too, because I tend to kind of ramble. So let's do some share screen for me too. Because after the lockdown happened, people were feeling at a loss that we weren't able to hold our organizing event that we do every year. And folks were feeling, man, we really need to know what's happening, but because we can't be in a room together with our membership. So we convened an action team of our members to respond to the moment. And we launched a listening campaign where our member leaders decided to design a survey tool and spend the whole week just surveying our membership to see what their needs are, instead of assuming what folks' needs were and what was happening. So let me try to find, let me see my slideshow. Where is it?
And Jenny, is Monique set up to share her screen? Okay, great.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Folks see my screen? Do y'all see my screen right now? Okay. So I wanted to share with y'all the results of the listening campaign, because this is exactly what our membership and our leadership, our staff, and our board are studying right now to assess what is our response plan. Because the key thing for us as an organization, that we didn't want to assume what folks' needs were, and we know that in our hearts and minds that we have the solutions, but we also have the ability to assess our own problems instead of academics or outsiders determining what the issues are of our community. And there's significance to that because we're all coming from communities and countries and population groups where like people are always imposing and making predeterminations of what our needs and what our best thinking should be and how do we direct our own community. So it's important that we did this together. So let's see here, oops. So we had 13 members, leaders call over 89 people to get a sample of what was happening in our membership. We have about 1,100 members that we organized within the last maybe 6 or 7 years through the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights campaign that we helped win. And because of that, most of our membership, I would say 90% of our membership are domestic workers, but we also have members who work in hospitality, restaurants, in laundromats, and also in other childcare settings. And we learned that only 40% of our membership are still working, and the 40% of members who are still working, they're fearful and do not want to go to work because the conditions are uncertain. 71% of our members reported financial stress and being really scared. 55% reported that they have employment insecurity. For the ones that were let go, it wasn't really clear for them like what conditions they were let go, like whether or not they can have a job to come back. People just said, oh, you're not coming in today, but that's it. They didn't say, are you coming back? Are you gonna get, like any type of clarity of what their job situation is. So they're just kind of waiting like on the side, not sure what their employers are thinking about their livelihoods. And for about 40%, 39% reported they are still working. 13% assess that they are still working, but their hours were cut down drastically. So, and then 40% reported that they lost their job completely, like were let go, like they literally would show up to work, that day, and they said they were just turned back to go home, or some of them didn't even open the door for them to even come and have a conversation. So this is problematic because historically domestic workers are always like disrespected and not dignified in their contributions in the household. A lot of employers and families, they say they're part of the family until this kind of stuff reveals that they're really not. You don't really lock people out of your household and don't give them any certainty about their future and whether or not they care. So we recognize that a lot of our members are feeling very discouraged and even questioning their industry overall and whether or not they want to even return to work under these conditions. Let me see. And 30% of them also responded that other family members in their household lost their work. So this inside a household, there's so much uncertainty for the membership and the families. 30% said they reported, then this was just like 3 weeks ago. So 30% reported they were unable to pay rent at that time. And it's been a couple weeks now. So I imagine the numbers have increased. So thankfully for the work of the housing justice movement and City Life Vida Urbana, we were able to report out to our membership that they could not be evicted. And that was something that gave a lot of piece to our membership to know that, but that was still scary what happens afterwards. So this is such a key moment for us to also agitate our membership around housing rights, right? Because the majority of their expenses are going to be connected to their housing. So it's a key pivot right now. We're working with our membership to do more alignment work. Because as an organization, we are focused primarily on immigrant and labor rights, but like we know as intersectional, like how all these issues are, you know. And 18% 3 weeks ago assessed that they had food insecurity. So we're looking to figure out how do we leverage existing mutual aid networks to dispatch food to our membership that's very dispersed. What's hardship about us in the organization is that our membership are very, we're a lot, but all spread all over and far apart. So we're not concentrated in one neighborhood. So we can't be going knocking on doors and focus on one neighborhood. So we're trying to figure out how do we get aid to a member who is isolated in Pepperell, and then what about in Brockton, you know? So like, well, that's a challenge that we're trying to figure out right now, that we're hoping that our alliances, the networks could help complement our organizing and support. Yeah, so the big issue right now that was really big for us that we didn't anticipate, and we only learned from this, was that the deep mental health stress that our membership are going through, that we just, as you know, in the beginning, whenever all this was happening, people were really hustling around food, housing, economic stuff, but through our survey, we learned that people are deeply, deeply scared and depressed. A lot of our members are single women or single mothers or alone, and also alone far away from their own families that are in other countries or different neighborhoods. So they're deeply isolated, and some even said that they're scared to die alone, having nightmares and dreams about facing all this wildness around the pandemic alone, you know. So we're trying to figure out, our main project coming out of this for sure is trying to figure out how do we access mental health supports and do community-based supports for our members that are around mental health. Yeah. So for us, like, you know, we're learning all these things, but we're trying to think through, like, how do we use this moment to galvanize? So there's a lot of other like things that we're learning, but I just wanted to pivot us to like thinking about the future, because like we're trying doing this work right now to meet immediate needs, so our membership can feel supported, so we can actually do organizing work. Because it doesn't make sense for us to push people to organize if it doesn't meet their current needs as well, right? So we're trying to reevaluate all our existing work from before. And I know that we are working on creating new economic systems, because we do recognize that the industry of domestic work and childcare is deeply flawed, where it's off the back of the childcare workers, that other women who are that can go to work. And there are also like there's also childcare people who need childcare that are not getting their needs met through the governmental system. So we're trying to think through, how do we use the moment around mutual aid to think through like a mutual aid childcare, and also leverage that to think about how do we build alliances with women who are able to afford to pay decent wages to subsidize childcare for other women who are or other families who are low income. The key thing, this is like a quote that one of our leaders says. Yeah, so this is our member leader that's going to be the captain of the mental health team that we're dispatching during this time period. Yeah. So yeah, right now we're questioning everything. We're questioning the system. We like, you know, a lot of advocates have known, like, you know, capitalism and the existing system is problematic and it's designed for failure and it's designed for us to be in the situation that we are. But we never had like a tangible immersive experience until this moment under the pandemic to experience what a collapse could feel like. And we're trying to figure out as organizers, let me put the screen off. How do we do deep, rapid radicalization of our membership to create these new features? And we pivoted our childcare cooperative. We were thinking about like a typical not brick and mortar, but typical worker, childcare labor, worker cooperative before. But because of this moment, we recognize that we actually have to build something bigger, like an entire ecosystem of around childcare consumers and childcare workers to come into contract with one another. So during this time period, I also merged a project that I was working around about building an ecosystem around language justice, and then trying to leverage that project to make what we call now is a contractor cooperative, where the consumers, the investors, and the workers within the cooperative are all in social contract with one another, where they're aligned. When people come into the contract, they already align on the wages and the conditions of everybody in that. And then the different classes of people, whether the consumers and the consumers and the providers, they agree on the contract together, and they come in together as as stakeholders within the same cooperative. So it's a hybrid of multiple classes, and this is a most current innovation that we're working out. And we're just recruiting people one by one and seeing how it goes. But it's part of our emergence and figuring stuff out, and it's very new. So it's a lot of iteration that we're trying to do right now, because we're trying to rapidly, how do we organize the people who are unemployed, right, and train them up on what a dignified and respectful and dignified wage look like as you re-enter the workforce, and come back to your employers and being like, well, I have this contract now, and you will, I'm only going to come back under these conditions. So we're trying to take advantage of this moment when folks are being like feeling deeply hurt by the system, and like show and shield them with an opportunity to come back with dignified approach, instead of being like just coming back to the work as it was before. We cannot return to normal. So this is what we're experimenting with right now.
Very cool. Thank you, Monique. I also just want to say really quickly, I think most of us know this already, but I did just want to point out that both City Life Vida Urbana and Matahari are Ujima's Grassroots partners. We always try to support their campaigns and try to make sure Ujima members know about the events and know about actions and know about what's happening. But just for those of you who may not have been aware of that, just wanted to make sure that you know that we are all in deep relationship with each other, and for Ujima, we basically kind of look to our grassroots partners for guidance on policy and organizing. So this is also, as far as the wider ecosystem goes, an important conversation, and for Ujima, it's an important conversation as well. So Lisa, because Monique, you've talked about this a little bit already, but feel free to add to this. You're now moving to the housing guarantee after having won the strongest eviction and foreclosure moratorium in the nation. For City Life, or even for you personally, do you see any additional new opportunities in this moment? This could be as broad or specific as you want. And actually, I would say the same thing for you, Monique. And you've talked about the experimentation that you're doing, but I'm just curious. Right now, is there anything that you're saying there's an opportunity here?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Economists and policy analysts, et cetera, are comparing our time to the Great Depression. This is huge, right? So I didn't live through the Great Depression, but I grew up with my grandmother, and I remember having a whole pantry full of canned goods for well into my. I'm saying that to say we in my generation and folks who are younger than me have no idea what we are about to walk into. So, but we have an inkling. We know that at least 36 million people across the country have filed for unemployment, at least, right? And this is just the beginning. We haven't even crossed the threshold yet. So that's on top of all of the death, all of the illness, all of the care work that our people are experiencing, right? So there's a lot of pain, and more and more and more people are experiencing this pain. And there's more pain to come. There's a lot more pain to come. So the one opportunity, if you can call it that, is we have we've never had this opportunity to look at someone who may not share our exact class background, but who, from their circumstance, is experiencing a level of economic and social dislocation, so much that they're looking at us they're looking at us and saying, oh, your situation kind of reminds me of mine, and not looking at the class ahead of them, right? So, so a shorthand in my head is everybody who owes has much more in common than with folks who own, right? So when you think about debt, those of us who owe debt have a lot in common with each other. And we have much more in common with each other than those people, those handful of people that own our debt. So this campaign around debt, around abolishing debt of all kinds, so renters and small business owners and small homeowners who are not able to pay their rent or their mortgage during this pause are accumulating thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. We know that the real estate industry is so mad that they lost this last battle that they're telling their corporate, the folks that the corporations that they represent, they're saying as soon as day 46 hits, which is when the moratorium lifts, 46 days after the state of emergency, start evicting people. Waves upon waves upon waves of evictions. Imagine what that's going to do to housing court. Imagine what that's going to do to seniors. Imagine what that's going to do to young families. Imagine what that's going to do to anybody that owes 3 months of rent or mortgage. Just imagine. So, and now imagine all of these people saying, you know what, I shouldn't have to pay this. I should get bailed out in the same way that the banks got bailed out. Not only can I not pay it, but it's actually immoral to tell me that I have to pay this debt. Imagine all of us who owe debt saying that at the same time. That's an opportunity that really does parallel the New Deal. I mean, there's no other time period that will match the scale at which we're talking about policy change. So, yeah. But we have to step into that as organizers.
Thank you, Lisa. And the chat is blowing up, but I'll give Monique an opportunity to answer this question if she would like to. And then I'll just say the chat is blowing up, and I'll just read the questions really quickly so we just kind of get them out there. So Joyce asked, Lisa, how can we take advantage of the housing now? Addison asked, is this a good time to try and form a housing cooperative? Nadav is just confirming what you said, Lisa. He said there were 3,000 people on the Movement Generation webinar last night. And I believe this is in response to the housing cooperative. Addison asked, where's a good place to turn to support for that, for the housing cooperative? All right. So, and then I don't know, Monique, if you wanted to respond to that question, and then we'll go to Joyce's question.
I just agree with Lisa 100%. Like there's this moment is everything around social justice, because it puts us all under the closest we've ever been and aligning all of our movements. So it's like a key moment for us to align as movements too that have been historically been siloed because of nonprofit stuff too. And now nonprofit sector is also at risk because they're deeply tied to the financial systems too, right? So it's like philanthropy is also consolidating, and is also, our organizations are also pressure, we also have to face the reality that we will have to align to. If it wasn't organizationally, it's politically now more than ever that we are having to learn to, like, as labor organizers, learning about housing rights, like forcing us to, and also housing rights folks will probably have to learn more about labor stuff, so it's like, and also women's rights, because folks are in houses and domestic violence is off the charts, so it's like a lot of things are happening right now because of the pandemic. So the alignment opportunity is so big for all of our movements right now, and I think it's a key moment. So I agree with that.
Thank you so much, Monique. And so Lisa, Joyce asked, how can we take advantage of the housing now?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there are, we have an opportunity to, one, take back our resources, right? So abolishing debt is a huge, huge deal. It frees up public and private resources to do things like invest in community land trusts, which is sort of like a great companion to a housing cooperative, right? A housing cooperative or housing that is cooperatively managed and governed on land that is socially owned is what we're fighting for, right? And so with this with this recession/depression that we're about to go into, we don't know how investors will respond, but it is likely that they will try to dump toxic assets, dump assets that are no longer appreciating, and we need to be waiting. We need to be pressuring government, our city government, our state government, to take that land back and to keep it under public or social ownership. And once we have that land and that housing, then we need to be really investing in community land trusts. The idea is to come out of this recession or depression with more socially owned land that is more democratically governed than when we came into it.
Thank you, Lisa. And it seems like you've answered a bit the question of, is this a good time to try and form a housing cooperative? But do you want to say a little more about that, or do you think you've answered that sufficiently?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we're not in the housing cooperative game, and I see that there's some resources in the chat around how to finance that. But what we do is community land trusts, and there's such a sisterhood there.
Thank you so much. And I'll pause for a minute to see if there are any more questions, comments. I appreciate the wonderful use of the chat for your comments and questions, but I'll pause. All right, we've got one from John. What is the legislative mechanism for city or state purchasing of land?
So there is publicly owned lands, not a ton left in the city of Boston, but there still is, and there's state-owned lands. So we want to keep that. You know, we don't want the state, the government, to sell off the land that's ours. So that's one. Two, through our organizing, we fight to take control of privately owned land in the form of tenant. So when tenants organize associations in their building, their demand is always that the landlord makes sure that the building is up to code and that they have fair rents, et cetera. If the corporate landlord refuses, then we say, well, you should sell it to a nonprofit who that will take care of this housing, it's like a profit center, and that's how we have. So we've used tenant organizing to in essence, make it worth, give the corporate landlord enough pain to say, listen, I don't want this in my portfolio anymore. I'm going to sell it to a nonprofit developer or to a community land trust. We did that in the foreclosure crisis. Banks that were trying to foreclose on homeowners who themselves had predatory loans. We fought, and we either had their foreclosures overturned, or we fought the foreclosure process and forced the banks to either sell the homes back to the individuals or to a community land trust. And so that's another way of getting what's in private hands into the public or into socially owned housing. And the city is a key partner because often the resources to do that are in part through public subsidy.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And I see affirmation from Steve in the chat. So Steve said community development block grants, home or federal funding streams, or CLT land purchases. Totally appreciate the CLT stuff. Land prices are going to fall. So it's a very good time to increase social property. And then Nadav also affirming the debt conversation, really inspired by the call for abolishing debt. I remember Ujima hosted Debt Collective a while back. We did a couple of events with them. And I know recently they've been doing kind of nationwide webinars, much like Movement Generation did. I think one was with I want to say Arundhati Roy and a couple other people. And so I can only imagine that was the attendance for that was probably massive. Just to your point about you know, different classes kind of seeing each other as peers. Right now and tuning into that conversation. So I see people starting to come in from the member teams. Thank you so much, Lisa, Monique. I have to say, Monique, I'm super curious about the contractor cooperative. So we may actually probably invite you back next week for the workers' perspective. But thank you so much. I'm gonna pause this one more time just to make sure no one had any kind of final burning thoughts or questions that they wanted to get out. I think, John, I think you thumbs up Lisa's last response. Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Monique. And so, Jenny, I think we can now end the recording. And